everyone, and welcome to the TDWI webinar program. I'm Brenda Woodbridge, and I'll be your moderator. For today's program, we're going to talk about modernizing ETL for faster cloud data migration. Our sponsor today is Etl. For our presentations today, we'll first hear from Dave Stodder with TDWI. Following Dave's presentation, he will then host a roundtable discussion with Ranjith Ramachandran from Etl and Shiv Narayan from AWS. But before I turn over the time to our speakers, I'd like to go over a few basics. Today's webinar will be about an hour long. At the end of the presentations, our speakers will host a question and answer period. If at any time during these presentations you'd like to submit a question, just use the Ask a Question area on your screen to type that in. If you have any technical difficulties during the webinar, click on the Help area located below the slide window and you'll receive technical assistance. If you'd like to discuss this webinar on Twitter with fellow attendees, just include the hashtag TDWI in your tweets. Finally, if you'd like a copy of today's presentation, use the Click Here for a PDF line there on the left middle of your console. In addition, we are recording today's event, and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version so you can view the presentation again later if you'd like, or feel free to share it with a colleague. So, okay, again today we're going to talk about modernizing ETL for faster cloud data migration. Our first speaker today is Dave Stodder. As an analyst, writer, and researcher, Dave has provided thought leadership on key topics in BI, analytics, IT, and information management for over 2 decades. Previously, he headed up his own independent firm and served as vice president and research director with Ventana Research. He was the founding chief editor of Intelligent Enterprise, a major publication and media site dedicated to the BI and data warehousing community, and he served as editorial director there for 9 years. With TDWI Research, Dave focuses on providing research-based insight and best practices for organizations implementing BI, analytics, performance management, and related technologies and methods. Dave, I'll turn things over to you now.
Thank you very much, Brenda. And welcome to everyone who's on our webinar today. Thanks for joining us. I think we have a topic that's very much near and dear to TDWI community members. And so I'd like to welcome everyone, and we'll have a good discussion today. So I'm going to do kind of a little preamble to a roundtable discussion, which I think is going to be really interesting with Ranjith and Shiv. So what I want to talk about is some of the trends and directions we're seeing around modernizing ETL for faster cloud data migration. So let me just get started here. And so my first slide is really just to look at some research that we have around cloud data migration, how drivers are expanding workloads, which of course is putting pressure on ETL processes because they're needed for pretty much all workloads. So it's a business-driven momentum. There's a lot of pent-up desire, to do more kinds of things, different types of use cases to respond to immediate business situations rather than just have to be dealing with managed reporting and sort of regular dashboards. And so that's a big pressure. Definitely an idea of taking advantage of the high-performance platforms that are available in the cloud. The need for single, complete, and contextual views. So that kind of goes along with the business-driven, try to understand in the context of, say, customer behavior, or supply chain behavior, performance of certain applications that organizations are putting out there for their customers or for their partners. And so let's just look at some of the stats here. We can see that 41% want to increase the scale and speed of their data transformation, ETL, the data integration processes. We have your 42% want to optimize the pipelines transformation and quality. So these are pretty high percentages of where we can see that organizations are going to the cloud and they see immediately that this is something they want to address and fix in their cloud as they move to the cloud. A couple other things, you have modernizing digital as part of digital transformation. So as they're moving applications and processes to be able to improve the data integration, which includes the ETL layers for those processes. Now, there's different strategies that organizations use, and some use a mixture of them depending on the project or the different operation in the organization. But just to kind of summarize, and you can see that there's different strategies around ETL behind it. Lift and shift, where configure the cloud-based image in the image of the existing system. Basically, you just want to move it to the cloud as quickly as you can, take advantage of the cloud platforms, the scalability and performance, and pretty much try to leave everything as it is. And we see in our research, 18% say this is an accurate description of their migration strategy, 39% somewhat accurate. And of course, maybe the downside of that is that you might be moving over processes that really ought to be modernized and fixed. But it's kind of the idea of lift and shift, move it together. Another idea is phased migration. So you look at all the pieces that are associated with, say, a particular application or a user group in the organization, certain data sets, maybe a certain platform, a database platform, or user functions, and then move everything associated with that. So you have to have good knowledge of the data there and its use cases, its workloads. So 22% say this is accurate, 46% somewhat. So a little bit more than the lift and shift. Some want to start small and grow. And this is typical, for newer companies. They want to use it as a runway to evaluate the services and the costs associated. So they're just sort of moving to see how it goes and then moving more later. 29% say this is accurate, 40% somewhat, so a little bit more than the phase migration. And then cloud first for new projects. So these two, start small and grow, and then the cloud first look like they have the most, this is what most of the organizations do, but you can see it's pretty distributed around. Cloud first being that anything new is going to go to the cloud. So they'll maintain the existing systems as much as they can, but all future development goes to the cloud. So 28% saying this is accurate, 27% somewhat accurate. And then, of course, there's those who have no strategy, no overall strategy. They're just doing kind of piecemeal. This is where organizations, frankly, get in a little bit of trouble because they build data silos into the cloud. It's good to have a plan. But here we can see 13% say this is accurate, 32% somewhat. So this can affect certainly ETL as part of the data migration. So the cloud offers scalable, high volume, flexible storage and processing. That's the fantastic part of it. RISE and cloud data lakes. So that sometimes goes with that kind of trying to lift everything in there to make the data more available, to take advantage of the new platforms, and also to stream in lots of different types of data, structured, unstructured, semi-structured data. ELT. So sometimes that's the plan, to try to move all the data there, take advantage again of the processing power to do the transformations, change the order, in other words, of the ETL to ELT. And this is, around overcoming the limits of the traditional on-premises data warehousing systems, which is dominated by fixed configurations built for the known data, usually for reporting, and known workloads. So this is where you're trying to get to more of a flexible posture. And of course, this is very much driven by analytics and particularly development of AI and machine learning. 67% say this is a significant driver behind their cloud migration, is to support analytics and try to build that kind of new platform for expanding outward with analytics and AI and machine learning algorithms. So let's look at some of the challenges. And here we can see I'm kind of talking about the various things that have to do with the ETL and data integration. Really, they all do. I mean, data ingestion, egress, extraction, migration, costs, and we see a lot of things in here in the chart have to do with cost, concerns about cost. So reducing costs or managing costs better is one of the major reasons why organizations go to the cloud, but it's also one of the issues that they have to deal with immediately. And so it's common, we see it in a lot of things here, but a lot of it is around, trying to get better ingestion, the ETL kind of processes that they see that those are really the things that are costly. They're, latency, which in its own way can add to costs. Lack of skilled personnel to model the data, improve the quality. So they're coming up against, they don't have enough automation, not enough tooling, too much manual work going on. 32% say speed to data insights not fast enough, which can be due certainly to ETL, often is due to ETL processes. Basically, they're trying to, pick up the pace of getting the business value, getting the speed to data insights down so that users, the business can make better decisions. 36%, I mentioned that, lack of personnel. So we can see here, and you can probably compare these to some of the things in your own organization around particularly the data integration and ETL processes. So some of the biggest challenges that we see most often time and complexity, and I have here volume and complexity. So it's really the volume, the time, and the complexity of ETL jobs. And then having a lack of a holistic view of all the jobs. I mean, a large organization could easily have hundreds, often thousands of ETL processes going on. And some are dependent on each other. Some conflict with each other. Some are redundant. Some are just running and they're not really used. The reports and dashboards, for example, are not as relevant as they used to be. So there's a lot of reasons why it's important to have that holistic view and to be able to bring some control, and certainly governance is another issue that can be a problem. So it's critical for all of these processes. Democratization is increasing the number of users and the number of workloads, adding to the complexity and often the time and often the cost. So this is why it's very important to get on top of ETL as you move to the cloud and migrate to the cloud. Latency, errors, the volume, 31% want to reduce the latency as it's one of their top priorities. Another is self-service. So along with this is trying to empower users to do more of have more control over ETL, obviously because they know the data, they know what their use case is, and they want to be able to do ETL properly so it's fit for purpose. So 30% there, so pressures on that as well. And then wanting to reduce the time. So we've seen our research and we asked us to see, and unfortunately this number really hasn't moved. In fact, it's increased the amount of time that users are spending, the percentage of their time. So over 35% say their users are spending more than 60% of their time on these areas. And so that's really too much. And so the idea of trying to reduce the amount of time so there's more time for, really developing the business value of the data. And then, lack of visibility into the dependencies between ETL jobs, so that if an ETL job is changed, it can mess up a lot of things. And then the downstream impact of these changes, such as moving to the cloud and migrating to the cloud, could have on the related processes. Okay, so just to close my portion before we get to our discussion, cloud data migration, it's a great opportunity to improve ETL, to make it more efficient, to take advantage of the platforms to improve the scalability and performance, have more flexibility, and do a better job of kind of a holistic management of all of them. Leaving behind the legacy constraints, that's what you're kind of doing as you move to the cloud, and so to take advantage of that. Organizations, we see costs being such a huge issue, so it's important to bend that cost curve down so that it's not just sort of increasing with the increasing number of users and workloads and the complexity. Make good use of technology advances. So that's where the cloud native services and processing are very important to ETL to take advantage of those advances, parallel processing, for example, to improve ETL as you migrate to the cloud. And then the other is really not so much on the technology side, but just on the people side, just to improve sharing of best practices, sharing of the working ETL processes that have been satisfactory for users and have similar use cases, and sharing knowledge about the data. So this is the kind of thing that can be done in centers of excellence, formalizing how data stewards and experienced users share insights, stewards being very important to pointing users to the right data sets and addressing issues around conflicts around ETL and data quality issues. So having a center of excellence or some sort of committee, which maybe even driving lunch and learn kind of sessions, can be very valuable. Okay, before I close, I want to do a poll question with our audience to get a sense of what the audience is thinking. So what is your biggest challenge in modernizing ETL for faster cloud data migration? Is it difficulty mapping or migrating and modernizing due to conversion and mapping complexity? Wouldn't surprise me if this is a topic because that is one of the hardest parts of ETL. Too much manual work and not enough automation. So we saw there that that's something that can add to latency and even cost. Too little visibility into ETL dependencies and downstream impacts of changes such as cloud data migration. So this is also a key issue, not having enough visibility into those issues, which can really have a major impact on jobs. Users want self-service capabilities and less dependence on IT. So we saw, again, there was a pretty good percentage that are looking for self-service ETL. And then finally, concerns about ETL scalability and performance. And then we also have others. So if you want to just enter something in the Q&A format, we can talk about that when we get to the Q&A. All right, let's take a look at the results. Yep, and we do see 50% saying difficulty migrating and modernizing due to conversion mapping and complexity. So we'll be talking about that in our roundtable. 20% saying too much manual work and not enough automation. And then, significant percentage, 10% saying to the final three about too little visibility, self-service, concerns about ETL scalability. All right, thank you very much. And let me pass it on, I believe, to Brenda. You're going to introduce Ranjiv and Shiv.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much, Dave. And just a quick reminder to our audience, if you have a question, you can enter it at any time in the Ask a Question window, and we'll be answering those questions in the final portion of our program. And it is now my pleasure to introduce our guest speakers for today. First is Ranjith Ramachandran with Wavicle Data Solutions. Ranjith, an enterprise solutions architect at Wavicle, has more than 17 years of experience working with complex systems, data analytics, and various cloud architectures. Ranjith is an expert in automation and integration solutions in support of customer relationship management and other business functions. He contributes to the data, analytics, cloud, AI, and ML communities through mentoring, publications, and webinars. Ranjith holds a master's degree in data science and is a recipient of the AI Business Strategies and Applications Executive Immersion Program from UC Berkeley. And joining him today is Shiv Narayana from AWS. Shiv is a product manager with AWS Glue. He has over 20 years of data integration and data management experience. Once again, welcome Ranjith and welcome Shiv. Glad to have you here today, and I'll hand it back to you, Dave.
Thanks, Brenda. All right, well, let's get going with our roundtable. And Ranjith and Shiv, thank you for joining us today. It's good to have you. So we wanted to get into, I've got a number of questions we can address. And so the first is really, what are the actual benefits customers today are seeing by migrating to serverless ETL and from traditional tools that run on a dedicated server?
Yeah, David, I think I'm going to take a pass at that question because it's closer to me. So it's actually a very interesting question, right? And I think the first thing that if you parse this question, the first thing we really need to answer is, what do we mean by serverless ETL? Because a lot of times, when we talk to customers, a lot of the first question is cloud not serverless, right? So if you kind of look at the cloud to begin with, broadly you can see your any of the applications kind of organized into three main buckets. The first one is self-managed, which is, you could go into AWS, you could spin up your EC2 instances, you will be able to install the software, run it. So that's actually somewhat you manage it. Of course, there's larger AWS contribution in terms of managing the server itself, but you are installing, patching, you're doing a lot of that. The second category of it is this, that managed service. A lot more services within AWS are there around EMR. The biggest difference between the first option and the second option is, you are basically making choices on, and then AWS runs that on your behalf. You are still seeing servers. You still make choices about how big of a computing cluster you need. You still basically say, I want auto scaling or not, things like that. Now, serverless really takes you to the next category, right? You really don't even concern yourself about any of these infrastructure decisions. You're basically focused on the business problem. You are developing your code, and you are simply with the click of a button executing it, and not necessarily worrying about what kind of a VPC or, it's granted that, we take care of a lot of security and aspects that actually customers run on, but really that's really is the next level of, running your jobs by focusing on your business problems. So now that we've made the differentiation, right, like customers who choose serverless ETL, the actual benefits that they're seeing, you kind of classify them into 6 broader categories. The first one is the scalability. So some of our customers who actually had challenges running SLA-sensitive workloads in their on-premise setting because they're using a single or 3 or 4 node clusters are now able to get their own dedicated clusters. They're able to run their jobs much faster. They're able to adhere to the SLAs. They're able to run a lot more in parallel. So that's the number one benefit that they're getting. The second thing that I think I really like the way you put it in terms of the cost, right? Like, so that's actually some of the more common concerns. And, they're able to see the cost benefits. And this is a very interesting thing that one of our customers, when we spoke with, they're from automotive, and when the pandemic hit, not many people were renting cars. You can literally see that they're billing, right? Like, kind of when you're not using, when the data volumes are low, your bill starts to kind of come down. So it's really cost effective and scalable from that perspective. The third thing, I think, is the speed in terms of how fast you can actually deliver. Because you're focused on the business problem, because you're not focused on infrastructure management, it significantly accelerates your delivery. The fourth thing, and this is very important, is innovation. So traditionally, our customers were focused on a simple problem like duplication of. They'll actually be writing millions of lines of code or hundreds of thousands of lines of code, right? Like kind of even deduplicate data because they're handling edge cases. Now they're able to use machine learning because these modern technologies use machine learning and infuses that at the right points for our customers' benefit. And lastly, open. So which means that customers really don't want to keep migrating from one tool to the other. So they really choose this serverless ETL tools because they are built in open platforms, keeping their code and open technologies that they can take anywhere else.
Great. Well, I think you really hit the nail on the head in a lot of those answers. So how do you decide whether data models and ETL require a redesign or could be migrated?
Yeah, it's actually one of the very challenging aspects, and as well, it is also a very important topic to be handled, right? So, and when you kind of talked about this in the beginning, right? You talked about two options. One is lift and shift. The other one is you completely modernize. And you also outlined a number of strategies around how you can actually kind of go about doing modernization, right? So one of the common things where we notice is, customers lift and shift is a great option, but when you kind of modernize, there's definitely the aspect of you getting the best of technologies, really optimizing for what serverless is meant to do. The number one thing that I think you have to kind of make sure that when you're going into this modernization journeys is to take away this notion that, this whole thing is actually going to exactly look like what I'm used to. It's actually very different, especially when you come to cloud. The techniques are different. You're actually processing with several multi-cluster nodes, so the techniques are really different. But what in common what we're seeing is our customers obviously go through a whole set of analysis, and typically what we're seeing is they tend to keep their final data models the same, which usually gets accessed by their end customers. So for example, their dashboards, reporting layer, they remain largely the same, but they're really modernizing the other inner workings. For example, if there is a staging layer, they'll actually typically replace that with the data lake. They'll use serverless technologies to extract that data. They'll use CDC to kind of, improve their pipeline. So really reimagining that, they do it because they are able to actually drive business value. For example, instead of using a common batch workload to ingest data, they probably would use a change data capture mechanism to improve that faster ingestion time. So really keeping that final models intact and then reworking on the internals is one very common pattern that we see, and it's actually been successful as well.
Cool, great. Yeah, I think we see that in our research as well, particularly around CDC, yes. All right, let's move on to a few more questions. I'll bring Ranjit in here. So what works to reduce time-consuming ETL and development work? And then a kind of a little side question, that is, where could automation reduce manual work, such as coding?
Sure, Dave, I'll take that. So if you look at ETL pipelines, it was different a decade ago, and now it's completely different. So this is because the architecture, the data surrounding ETL has changed and evolved a lot. So the traditional way of performing ETL is by doing a manual code and or using legacy tools which are not scalable and very expensive from a license and a manageability perspective. Or even now many companies create their own framework that may require a range of different skill sets to manage and maintain. Whereas now with the serverless ETL tools like a Glue, it is much easier to create ETL pipelines. It automates all the code generation, and it also allows the data engineers to look at the code and allow to modify or update anything is needed. And also it integrates very well with the other services. By that way, it's more of an automated way of doing rather than you doing any hand-coded ETL process.
Great. Yeah, well, I think we saw in our research here that automation is very important, that users are spending really a lot of time on this area, and it's time that they would like to reduce. So next question would be, what do organizations need in order to overcome the complexity of understanding their current ETL jobs?
Okay. Yeah, I'll take a stab at it, and probably Shiv, feel free to add. So generally, when we do any modernization, it starts with understanding the current landscape. Next, we need to assess and prioritize any subject areas, and associated business-related data pipelines and workloads. And then, we based on that, we decide the overall roadmap for the business from the business perspective. Then we leverage tools to assess the current ETL environments, including detailed analysis, which gives the complexity of different ETLs, the risks of migration, the inventory of all the the jobs, the components, and who's the user base, and all of that extra, right? So once we have that kind of a inventory, we can break it into a smaller domain or a subject area and come up with estimates for each of them, and then tie to the overall roadmap, so that we get a holistic view of how long this is going to take. So in order to do this, we leverage some of an automated assessment tools we have that can infer the different ETL mappings of jobs, which speeds up or eases the migration journey.
Great. Shiv, I don't know if you want to add to that.
No, I think, Rajat, you covered it well. As you or as customers are migrating away, right, I think the most important thing is always keeping it's so often we say this all the time, but it's just one of the things that I think is very not really followed, even though everybody knows this, is associating why you're actually doing it in every step of the journey, right? Because it's actually challenging, and thankfully, like SI partners like Bavical have developed these automation tools that actually can convert. But like every time of the way, you really need to make sure that you're associating why you're actually doing it, and even educate your team members and the leadership along the way as to what benefits it actually brings to the table, right? So, and if you look at the benefits, it's not just only cost, but the innovation aspects to it, the scalability aspects to it, the ability for you to deliver the data faster. All of this actually makes a lot of sense. I think, some of our more successful customers who actually migrated have had a great change management effort underway, always continuing to message that, why you're actually doing this.
Right. Well, let me ask you guys a last question on the list here. So how can they streamline ETL code conversion and mapping, which we saw as a lot of complexity and can add a lot of time? So I'll ask that first question. So how can they streamline and do a better job with that? So Ranjit or Shiv, which one?
Yeah, I'll check that. Shiv, feel free again to add. First of all, to start with any ETL migration, it starts with defining the total cost of ownership and assessment to identify potential savings from migrating along with the cost of the modernizations. So the most important thing to consider part of this journey is how much it's going to cost, the effort we are going to put in this one, and the timelines for the modernization. So this is where, for streamlining, what we generally do is we bring in the automation. It plays a significant role in the decision-making process as well, not only in the migration steps. Because at this point we may know how long it's going to take, what is the cost, and how soon we can achieve this, right? So usually many enterprises starts with the planning. However, they may not use the right tool sets, and it takes an extended time to complete the whole modernization journey, and they feel like it's time for them to review and look for an additional help to get that completed, right? So generally, what we do is we follow a few steps, which has been very successful for us. The first one is to run the automated assessment area, where we understand the whole ETL landscape, and this will help us understand the complexities and help with the planning of the migration and we can understand what are the different types of complexities involved in each and every repositories or a process involved in the ETL. So second is the actual migration phase itself. Since we have the assessment results in the first phase, we know how long it's going to take, and based on that, we can bring in a few squads which can run some of them in parallel. And when we say automated, there are utilities where we leverage to convert the legacy ETLs to a newer ETL like Glue, which reduces about anywhere between 70 to 90% of the migration timelines. So that's the kind of a second phase. And more important is the data validation after we do the migration. So what we do is we run through a data validation using, again, an automated approach, whereas where we set more like a parallel environment to accelerate the validation process, where we compare the data between the old legacy code-generated data versus the new data which is generated by the modern ETL. And this is where we, again, leverage some of the automation testing tool, like a data capturer. And then, we reduce up to 80% of the overall testing and a validation effort. So, leveraging all these three, I think, it streamlines the entire migration process and also, expedites the overall, the migration journey.
Great. Shiv, I don't know if you want to add anything to this.
I think Ranjit covered this really well.
Okay.
Nothing much to add on this topic.
Great. Well, yeah, those were all good answers to those questions. So we have one more slide here. Here, just kind of in our part 3 of the discussion, just to kind of wrap it up. What steps do you recommend for establishing successful ETL conversion approach and to achieve faster cloud data migration? Shiv, maybe you can go first on that one.
Yeah. So in terms of the path, right? I think what we've seen our customers take as a successful path is step number 1 is all about doing the analysis, like Ranjit talked about, right? And there are automation tools that our partners like Radical have built that can actually do this automated analysis. And one of the most important steps as a result of that is actually to identify your different patterns, right? So for example, you have 30 ETL jobs that are ingesting data from, let's say, SAP into your staging area, 50, and then you can kind of divide this by complexity. Once you identify that, getting into a proof of concept and, basically taking each of these different patterns and kind of figuring out what is the best approach. Because even within AWS, there could be different approaches that you could take to accomplish that. For example, if you still want to continue a batch-based data integration, you could still be using AWS Glue for that. Or if you want to kind of change that into more of a real-time streaming, you can still use AWS Glue, but maybe introduce a Kafka or, like a Kinesis kind of an approach. So basically figuring out what is that approach that you want to take across each of those patterns. And then starting off with a pilot project, right, and taking few of those pipelines that makes a whole lot of sense, and taking it all the way from your dev environment to the production environment and leveraging automation as part of that and evaluating and making sure that that all works is probably the third step in this whole equation. And the fourth step is really to then scale out. And now that, you've done this, you've done this parts, and you've, as on the journey, you've built some frameworks and lessons learned, every lessons learned and every organization is going to be different. So, once you've done all that, then, you can just take it and migrate this over. So this kind of is the same approach, David, that you talked about, where, you kind of start off small and then go expand. The most important thing is starting off with that, patterns, taking that, finding out what's the right fit, then using automation to convert them, and then going big. So that's what we've seen that to be working. Ranjit, anything you want to add to that?
No, you're spot on, Shiv.
Yeah, I think that's great. So the last question here is, how does moving to these new tools impact our ability, an organization would ask, it is a common question we ask, to hire and train resources? We did see in our research that that's a big issue.
Yeah, it's actually quite interesting because some of our customers, so the reasons why they actually are choosing this is simply because you can actually get, you can hire better. And I'll just give you some examples, right? A lot of this cloud native services are actually built on open source, or at least they are built on the promise of the open platform, right? So you build once and you take it wherever you go. And the skill sets that are needed to build that is actually far largely available than somebody who understands proprietary code or how to specifically code a single transformation, right? So that actually improves hiring. And it also improves the overall morale and the fact that you're working on cutting edge cloud native services. That also is actually a big selling factor to a certain degree for data engineers to come and work in certain organization. So the ability for data engineers to kind of build these to the technology and open platforms, and then you're able to take those data engineering skills and use it across different projects because they're writing SQL, they're writing Python, or the user interfaces that we've built out is actually generating those code. They actually take that and then they're able to expand into machine learning based use cases. They're able to kind of get to the next career level moves. So that's actually very, very interesting for organizations, and that's one of the key drivers for a lot of these migrations.
Yeah, that's great. I think Go ahead, Rajiv.
Oh no. So I was about to say I agree with Shiv. Data engineers can work on different variety of tasks. However, a tool-based developers may get logged only in ETL development, which may in turn may become expensive for the organization in the longer run.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think we see certainly at TWI people want to do innovative things and stretch their capabilities rather than have to do just sort of routine things that don't really demand as much, but just definitely keep the trains running, of course.
Yeah. So this again, this ties back again with a lot of our platforms which are unified. So that's where all these data engineers can move around and help in different areas rather than getting logged in certain specific ETL related areas. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Okay, well, at this point, I think I'm going to hand it off to you, Shiv, to do your presentation. Thanks to both of you for the roundtable, and we'll talk more when we get to the audience Q&A.
Sure, thanks.
Sure. So I'm going to spend the next 5 minutes or so talking about AWS Glue. So I'm one of the product managers for the service in AWS. So fundamentally, what Glue is it is a serverless data integration service that allows customers to easily connect to a variety of data sources, extract that data, prepare, and ingest into modern data platforms for a variety of purposes, including analytics use cases, machine learning, even application development. So there are really key reasons why our customers love AWS Glue. The first one is serverless. I talked about this early on as to what does serverless really mean. The other interesting thing that our customers really love about Glue is it is actually data integration for every user. We believe that we are in an era where self-service is more common, even with data integration use cases. This was what BI was maybe 10, 20 years ago. Like drawing a pie chart was considered magical, and today it's not, right? So data integration is very similar. So business users want to be part of it. Data engineering skill sets are very rare these days. So you want to kind of leverage the business users to be part of the data engineering pipeline development. So if you're a data integration, if you're a ETL developer who loves visual development, you can use Glue Studio to build your jobs. If you're a data engineer who loves code, likes to kind of work on a notebook environment, you can take the same exact code and start running it on a notebook with AWS Glue Studio. Again, there's a serverless notebook that's attached to it. And then if you are a business user who loves to write no code and still transform, you can use Glue Data Brew. So it covers all kinds of personas. It's really a cost-effective option when you compare to other ETL technologies. The ability to handle complex workloads is very critical. These days, you are not dealing with any more relational databases. You have to deal with JSONs and more complicated data structures that are more nested, more importantly, real-time feeds that are coming in. So Glue offers ability to do all of this, starting all the way from complex JSON files to streaming data and batch and event data. And more importantly, there's no lock-in. What it really means is that when you author code in Glue, you can actually take that and run it elsewhere. In other environments, you can take them into your own Spark clusters or Python environments and then run them without the feeling of getting locked in. So these are some of the benefits of AWS Glue. And what do our customers really use Glue for? So they're using it to build data lakes, data lake houses, modern data platforms, data mesh, like whatever makes sense for that organization. They are kind of using Glue as the data integration tool to move data. They're migrating from expensive ETL tools. They're using just the capability of Glue Data Catalog to catalog all the data resources within AWS and outside. Other users include, customers who really love Spark and they want to find a serverless option for that, or they want to be able to do real-time processing with streaming, Spark streaming, so they use Glue just for that. And then there's also machine learning-based data preparation use cases who use AWS Glue. So this is a very high-level picture of different components of AWS Glue. On the left-hand side, you have a variety of data sources. These include on-premises data sources from other clouds, streaming data, SaaS applications, so on and so forth. We offer connectors where you can actually connect to these data sources. You can use crawlers to automatically discover schema. You can ingest the data into or you can actually take all the metadata and make this available in a data catalog. And then you have three options in which you can actually transform this data. If you're a data engineer who loves visual-based development, if you like the boxes and arrows, you can use Glue Studio to do that. If you're a data engineer who loves coding and who loves to basically build your jobs in an interactive in a notebook, you can use Glue Studio notebooks. And if you're a business user, you can use Glue Data Brew. And all of this runs, all the transformations that you're creating runs on a serverless data integration engine, which supports both Python and Spark. All of this gets executed on that. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure aspects of it. And then typically what we're seeing is our customers are ingesting this data into a data lake, and then they're using a variety of other databases for that final mile delivery. For example, they'll actually take this data and move it into a data warehouse for reporting and analytics. They'll probably take this and synchronize into open search like tools to do log analytics, moving into DynamoDB or NoSQL databases for doing application development. So basically, Glue can also help enable movement of that data into purpose-built data. Having said that, I'll pass it on to Ranjit. Ranjit?
Okay, thanks, Shiv. Variable data solutions, we provide data and analytics consulting services that help businesses across multiple industries that leverage modern architecture, cloud-based solutioning technology, and all of that to capture, analyze, and act on the growing volume of data. Our solutions reduce time, cost, and risk of a client's overall project while improving the quality of data and their insights, basically. We are an advanced AWS partner with a niche focus on data analytics and cloud consulting. We help organizations with their transformations effort by leveraging a 350 people team, diverse team in 3 countries across 42 cities. Our onshore, nearshore, and offshore model helps our clients to accelerate their go-to-market strategies and address the talent gap in any building or delivering custom solutions. So we are a minority business enterprise firm committed to DEI goals and drive to build an equitable ecosystem for our teams to thrive. We have a dedicated AWS practice focused on helping our AWS customers get the most value out of their investment in the cloud and also be a partner in their cloud journey. We have about 60 plus AWS certifications and consultants in that area, multiple AWS competencies. We are proud to be a go-to niche AWS partner in our data analytics space. We are also trusted for our technical expertise, business-led approach, and also our clients rely on us to solve their most complex business problems in a cost-effective manner. Our solutions also include data management, cloud engineering, data visualization, and data science areas. To cover a few awards and industry recognitions, we are a top workplace. We actually won top workplace awards two years in a row. We are a Stevie Award winner, a Cloud Award finalist, and we have been in INC 5000 fastest growing company for 3 years in a row. So that's about our company. I would like to discuss about one use case. Which we solved for one of our customers. So this again, building back on the roundtable discussion we just had. So this is an example of a client where we are currently working with. It's a retailer, about 1,500 POS locations, serving about 200 million customers a day. We took a hybrid approach where we migrated some of their ETL code through our automation process, as well as we did a little bit of re-engineering to enable some of the streaming. So we helped them move from an on-premise data warehouse to an AWS cloud-based solution. So they could give store managers a near real-time reporting on store sales as well as inventory. So the issue or the business problem where their on-premise system could not scale up to handle the volume of data and also variety of data, and they were not able to receive the insights on a timely manner. So those were the business problems. So for the solution, we used AWS managed services like AWS Glue for processing both streaming and batch data with AWS TimeStream and Aurora as a backend database. And other services we used were like Kinesis, Lambda, SQS, ECS, and so on. So again, AWS Glue was a key part of this solution because of the need to quickly integrate and transform with the Spark engine to process a different variety and a volume of data for more than 30 different data, I would say, transactional files across 1,500 locations. With this serverless approach, we were able to scale up rapidly, cater to the demand, and reduce the ops and ops maintenance and the infrastructure cost. So ultimately, the overall goal or the results is this solution. We were able to deliver a variety of benefits, which includes producing the transaction or inventory reports within 20 minutes. When compared to the previous solution, it was taking close to 8 to 10 hours to generate that. And the second benefit was the store managers have a near real-time insights, visible via their self-service dashboard, which they can use at any point. And lastly, the savings on the infrastructure management maintenance cost by AWS managed services. So these are all great, savings and benefits out of this solution. Shiv, do you want to add anything to this?
No, I think this is just a great case study on how serverless technologies can help accelerate some of the timelines. More importantly, also like the performance improvements, right? So this is a great case study on improving those things.
Thanks. That's it from my side. Thanks, and over to you, Brenda.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks for all that information. At this time, we're going to go ahead and jump into our audience Q&A. So again, we've still got some time here. If you have questions you want to submit, you can do so now. And let's go ahead and get started with this one. We'll start with this one for you, Ranjit. Someone is asking, does the converter convert all the mappings successfully?
Sure. So the automation or the converter, what we are talking about, the accuracy of the conversion is really, really high. Whereas, it's not, it's not magical. We have to, run through a couple of iterations initially. Like, Shiv pointed out earlier, we start with a smaller subset, understand, how the conversion works, fix the gap, and then, we apply that into a larger scale. So that's how we generally, work on this. And, from the accuracy perspective, it is really high. I would say close to between 80 to 95%.
Thank you. Here's the next one. I'm going to we have a couple of different questions coming in on sort of the same topic. I think these are probably geared towards Shiv. People are asking, sorry, it's moving and coming in. How do clients ensure that their costs are controlled when there's so much going on, a bit of a black box? How do you forecast the cost that is consumption-based to avoid runaway or unexpected large increases in cost?
I think it's a great question, especially a consumption-based model. You could very quickly have that cost overruns, but what we've seen is actually quite different, right? So typically, customers don't start day one with a production workload. Instead, they ease into it. So first of all, they'll have a smaller workload in a more controlled way where somebody's monitoring, and you can immediately understand the costs of it. There are also calculators out there, and if you're interested, we should also connect. There are mechanisms to connect for folks who are asking this question on some of the detailed calculators. So typically, the journey for understanding these costs are first, you'll kind of start onboarding a few workloads in a development setting. You can use these calculators to understand what the potential costs are. Typically turn on auto scaling, which is a new feature that is also available in Glue in a preview. So you can turn on auto scaling so that you're actually, you're not spending unnecessarily on things that you're not working or the worker nodes are not working on. And make sure that you can estimate at a smaller scale what it is and then extrapolate. So that's actually a very common way. The other thing that we've consistently noticed is our customers will actually onboard workloads, and over a period of time, with very little things or very little help from both AWS and our SI partners like Ravical, are actually able to fine-tune those to a much more reasonable level. So usually we see consistently costs decreasing. And thirdly, you have cost levers, like, for example, the Cost Explorer, where within AWS you have ability for you to actually put these checks in place to say, if this job runs for, longer time, just simply, abort it using a Lambda function. So basically there are other cost controls over there. So the TLDR version of what I said is that, number one, make sure that you're onboarding smaller workloads and then effectively testing them. That's one thing that they do. Second thing is use the levers that are already provided with AWS Glue, such as auto scaling, such as the Cost Explorer, making sure that you're able to set the right controls in place so that you're not overrunning the costs. And finally, as customers onboard more and more workloads, we've seen that they'll actually optimize it much more than day one, and we see that the costs usually come down.
Great, thank you. Kind of along a little bit, I think, along the lines, someone is asking if you can share some information on the cost of the converter on an annual basis versus the legacy tool. I don't know if Ron just want to start with that, or
probably when we are talking about the annual, certainly I can take this. When we talk about the annual basis, I assume you're asking about the total cost of running Glue, I guess, because it's converter is a one-time effort basically while doing the modernization, whereas the Glue cost is what I assume here it is actually. So compared to legacy tools, there is no licensing fee for a Glue, but you'll be charged for all the compute whatever you're using. Probably Shiv might be the best person to add on this one.
Yeah, I can add more to this one. So when you're running your jobs on Glue, the very transparent pricing model, right? So for example, let's say you took a job and you ran it on the Spark engine and you basically provided 2 DPUs, that's a bare minimum. That gives you, every DPU gives you 16 gigabytes of memory and 4 virtual cores for you to process the data. So if you just put in 2 of that and ran it for 1 hour, you will be charged 88 cents. So that's actually 44 cents per DPU per hour. So you can look at the savings that you can potentially have when you compare with others. I mean, that's an exercise for you to do, but the cost is just 44 cents per DPU per hour.
Thank you. Next question. We'll bounce back to you, Ranjit, and then and Shiv can add to it if he's got more. But question is, what is the overall project delivery approach? Agile or more iterative?
Okay, so if you consider any modernization or a ETL migration project, what we generally do is we do the assessment, we understand and break it by subject areas. And what we do is like we take a smaller piece, as we discussed before, and then run through that into multiple iteration. It doesn't mean that it is not agile. So what we do is just make sure that when we do the automated conversion or any re-engineering part of that, so it is tuned well so that it can be applied across multiple subject areas or domains. So it's a mix of, I would say, iterative as well as agile, but iterative is a very minimal period, probably could be a couple of weeks or few weeks, and then followed by the agile, where multiple subject areas can run in parallel once we define the strategy and how we do it.
Anyone else have anything to add to that? Otherwise, I'll move on to the next question someone has. They're asking, with our move to the cloud, users want self-service ETL tools, but IT is concerned about governance. How do we find the right balance?
Yeah, I can start off this for this question, right? So you're spot on, right? Like when you kind of talk about self-service, IT teams are very concerned about what, will users mess up my data? Will something happen, right? Like, what if they overrun on costs? So the couple of things that, our customers are doing is there are two types of self-service that you can actually think of. And this might resonate more to the data engineers, right? Like the first one is bringing your data into your data platform, right? So, for example, I have a new web service that got created. I want to bring that in. And, typically what happens is, our customers would create something called blueprints and make that available to end users. And they're actually, just simply entering values, for example, the name of the web service, what few questions that they have to answer. And then, the backend ETL is actually really developed one time by the data engineer, and then new data sets are onboarded. So in such instances, you really don't have a large cost issue because you are actually pre-populating all the DPUs that are needed, really getting into a controlled way. The second one is where we see a lot more self-service is not usually in cleaning up this data, right? Because cleaning up takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of persistent, data profiling analysis. Once you clean it up, the challenge for end users is really not it's not in the shape or form that I really want it to be. For example, you coded something as a M, but in reality, I want it as male, or your aggregation is wrong. I really needed it aggregated by like this and filtering. So those kind of things really for business users, the final mile delivery, it's actually very much controlled using tools like Data Brew. Blue Data Brew is a great way to expose that data and then have customers kind of come in and modify the or actually tweak your data and kind of take it to the next level, right? So those are really controlled, and again, you have a lot more features to make sure that you are limiting the number of DPUs or data processing units you're allocating. You're really defining. So I think the key is defining where self-service really plays. Like I said, the common patterns that we see is in the ingestion aspect and the final mile delivery aspect, and not necessarily somewhere in the middle where you're actually taking transforming. Ranjit or David, you guys want to add anything to that?
No, you covered it. Dave, feel free to add.
Yeah, I think the only things I would just add about governance that we do see it as important to have as part of training, to have responsibility for the data and make sure it's adhering to regulations. That should all really be at the beginning, so the users, as they do more self-service, they're aware of those governance priorities. So that's what I'd add.
Good.
Great, thank you. Well, we have unfortunately come to the end of our time. So let me take a moment to thank our speakers today. Again, we heard today from Dave Stodder with TDWI, Ranjit Ramachandran with Wavical Data Solutions, and Shiv Narayan from AWS. Also, of course, A big thank you again to Wavical for sponsoring today's webinar. Please remember that we recorded the event and we'll be emailing you a link to an archived version of the presentation. Feel free to share that with colleagues. Also, if you'd like a copy of today's slide deck presentation, use the click here for a PDF line. Finally, I want to remind you that TDWI offers a wealth of information, including the latest research, reports, and webinars about BI, data warehousing, and a host of related topics. So I encourage you to tap into that expertise at tdwi.org. From all of us here today, let me say thank you very much for attending. This does conclude today's event.